Alright, let's go ahead and see if the stream has gone live. Let's see. Alright, so it does look like the stream has gone live. Let me just go ahead and confirm that everything has been working.
Alright.
Oh, echo.
Yep,
nope, let's not have that. There we go. Let me make sure the chat is working. Alright, it appears to be working. There we go. Hello everybody, I know that this is probably a bit impromptu. I had planned to set it up earlier, but I was not feeling too well. I am feeling a lot better right now. I'm pretty sure it was just exhaustion from editing yesterday. I might have gone a bit overboard. The Xinyan video is about to be finished. That is the good thing. As far as that is concerned, it's probably going to be a very, very long video. But apart from that, it should be fine. There's a lot to talk about Xinyan, but that's not why we're here right now. Right now, we're here for Albedo. Today, we're going to be doing the pre-release analysis for Albedo. And I'm a bit nervous about this one because mostly when I do analysis of these sorts, I have a lot of time to prepare my words and say a lot of things. Change things, but we're going to be doing this one live, so let's see how that goes. But yeah, essentially, Albedo is going to be a new character that's going to be released tomorrow, basically, with the release of 1.2, and there is a lot of things to talk about. Albedo by himself is looking to be one of the more powerful 5-star characters that we'll likely get, in all honesty. Since the last time I've talked about Albedo, I've been going and doing a bit of research onto team compositions, weapons, and things that would work on that matter. Hello everybody, I'm happy that people are here. I did not have time to set up the stream, and we're significantly later than what I usually stream, so I'm happy that people are still here. But yeah, on to Albedo. We're mostly going to be going about him in the pre-release state. I do want to talk about a couple of the things that might change. The numbers that I'm going to be using are coming from Honey Genshin. For the most part, they are the numbers that are in the live client already. The likelihood that these numbers will be changed at this point in time is extremely low. I do have to mention, however, that it is not impossible. So just keep that in mind for the numbers that I will be showing. They are still subject to change. However, that is very unlikely. As for the next few things that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about the banner characters that come alongside Albedo, as well as if you should summon for them, what are the good conditions for you to summon for Albedo, and if you do plan on summoning for him, and if you do plan on spending money for him, how far should you go without wasting your money? People don't like him because he's a Geo support? Really? I don't see why not. I think Geo supports are absolutely amazing. Especially Albedo. Like, his potential for Petra support is insane. 35% extra damage bonus to a character that primarily has a single element is amazing. The Geo Resonance is also very strong. Although I can see why people would not want 2 Geo supports. That is definitely not ideal for a lot of teams. The Crystallize reaction is criminally underrated as well, especially on a character with Albedo, which is something we're going to be talking about because Albedo has multiple ways of getting elemental mastery naturally on the kit. And the thing about Crystallize shields that a lot of people don't understand is that the reason why they feel so weak is because they're not being properly invested into. The Crystallize shields can actually get to a very decent amount, especially when you're using them to counter elemental enemies, like when you're fighting the Oceanid. If you're fighting the Oceanid, if you've ever fought the Oceanid with Noelle, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Noelle is practically immortal versus the Oceanid because of the Crystallized Shield. Yeah, it's kind of weird that people would not like him. He's a character with insane potential for damage. Let's see. People are summoning for the 4 stars. The 4 stars in this banner are insane as well. Every single one of these 4 stars is amazing in their own right. In my opinion, Sucrose is a better Banner user than Venti, because she can also boost the rest of the team's damage with Elemental Mastery, and her consistency is much higher once you actually get into her first constellations. I would actually rather have a one constellation Sucrose than I would rather have a Venti. That's how highly I put Sucrose into. And Bennett is crazy. I think he has definitely become the number one 4-star character, with the second 4-star character being Fischl, who is also on this banner. So the banner is crazy. But who would want to farm Oceanid? Yeah, I know. I have Mona and Tartaglia, so it's been a struggle. Then again, it hasn't actually. Noelle is one hell of a boss fighter. I'll just say that much. But yeah, without getting too off topic, I do want to go ahead and start with the Albedo analysis. So let's go ahead and move over into that one, shall we? Alrighty. So, as a whole, Albedo is actually surprisingly flexible. Originally, I thought that his support potential was going to be the standout factor out of the entire kit, and don't get me wrong, it is. His support potential is where most people are going to put him. However, as it has been brought to my attention during the last stream, he does actually have a very high potential for the DPS role. Yes, significantly higher than current Zhongli, unfortunately. That might change once the buffs apply, but the potential for Albedo is very crazy in almost every role. As a support character, his elemental skill is beautiful. As a burst DPS, his burst is insane. And as a DPS, his second Ascension is crazy. The potential for this character to fit into any team is kind of insane. I don't think we've had a character that's S tier in every role apart from Albedo. He is, without a doubt, an S plus character on release, with the numbers that I have right now at least. There's still a couple quirks that we have to figure out with regards to the second Ascension passive in particular. The second Ascension passive build is very strong. Do not get me wrong, it is very, very strong. It is completely unnecessary, however. The base state of Albedo is so powerful as a support, that just getting him at C0 is already more than enough to have a powerful, very powerful team. So yeah, with that out of the way, I do want to go ahead and talk about the other things. Oh, this background music, is it not playing? My bad, that is my apology. Let's turn up the volume a little bit, shall we? There we go. You don't even know his skill kit? Perfect, this is what you're here for. Essentially, I'm going to be brushing over the normal attacks because the normal attacks are not really that interesting. The only thing that you have to know is that the normal attacks by themselves have really low scaling, like extremely low scaling. But they function very similar to that of Kaya's, at least from what I was able to tell from the little trailer that showed up. They are fairly fast, and that's something that we're going to be talking about for the DPS variant, because this is probably one of the few characters in the game that does not care about his scaling. And that's kinda crazy to me, that a DPS character could be a DPS character with the scaling not mattering. But yeah, his normal attack, the Favonius Blade Work Weiss, it's completely generic. There's nothing important to talk about here. The charge attack is completely generic as well. It's very similar to that of Travelers. The scaling is not super high to make it worth going to charge attack builds. The builds that are worth going for, we're going to talk about later. So that's pretty much the normal attacks, nothing of value here. Let's get into the real meat and potatoes of the entire Albedo package. That being his elemental skill, Abiogenesis Solar Isotoma. As an elemental skill... Oh, yeah, by the way, I am currently getting my numbers from Honey Hunter, so if you want to go ahead and gather and go into there, that is where I'm getting a lot of my numbers from. So, as an elemental skill, Solar Isotoma does so much that it's kinda crazy that people would think of this skill as bad. For starters, when Albedo casts this skill, he does geo damage on initial contact. This is important because, again, he's a geo character. He can be a geo Petra support. So being able to have your elemental skill do the geo damage immediately is very, very helpful. That way he can always pick up the crystallized shield immediately and then switch out. The most important part of the skill, however, is that after he casts it, he leaves a little flower in the center. This flower creates a massive radius around it. And any time that you hit an enemy within this radius, an explosion will happen on that enemy. The explosion is geo-based, and it scales with defense. Defense scaling is very important for a lot of support characters, because it makes it so that they can focus on just a single thing without having to worry too much about damage. It is usually very helpful if other parts of the kit have defense scaling. If it is just a single one-off thing, it can actually become a bit of a hindrance. For Albedo, this is not the case, however. Defense scaling helps him quite a lot in this regard, especially because his defense is very, very high. It is probably on the highest tiers of defense. If I remember correctly, his defense was like 880, 876 at max level. So that will scale very, very highly. As far as the skill itself, if the explosion can trigger every 2 seconds, and it has a duration of 30 seconds. With a cooldown of 8. It has a cooldown of 8 seconds. That's just crazy to me. We have skills in the game that do significantly less, like Xingqiu's for example, and have massive cooldowns. So having a skill that does this much on such a low cooldown is kind of insane to me. But apart from that, the damage of the defense does go pretty highly. If you were to trigger every single explosion for the entire duration, the scaling at level 6 will far surpass the 1,500 mark. Pretty much being the same as casting 2 bursts from just attacking enemies. That is how high of an attack boost we're talking just from having Albedo on the team. The fact that the explosion is also geo means that every 2 seconds, if you have a character that can prime an element onto your target, you will also be getting a crystallized shield. And probably the most important part about the way that this crystallized shield is generated, at least from what we were able to tell in the trailer, it appears to generate in a similar manner to that of Noelle. And if anybody has played with Noelle alongside their crystallized shields, one of the things that you will notice is that the crystallized shield, when you're using it on a melee attack, will almost always be picked up immediately, because it spawns in front of you. That means that for characters that can prime the element, they can prime an element and then use the Solar Isotoma to its maximum potential, they will have a crystallized shield every 2 seconds. And the crystallized shields can get pretty high in health. If you're using them to fight elemental enemies and you get the crystallized shield of that elemental enemy, the shield can go to like 3,000, 4,000, even 5,000 HP, depending on your elemental mastery. So having a shield this powerful every 2 seconds will mean that as long as you're only getting hit like once every 2 seconds, you're unlikely to die. It's a lot of defense. You can make 15 of these shields, and Albedo can keep the Solar Isotoma pretty much permanently. Just imagine a buff in any game that gives you 5,000 temporary HP every 2 seconds. Now imagine that the average damage in that game is around 2,000 every second. You can start to see why this scales out of control. This doesn't mean that you're immortal, however. Do keep in mind that there are a lot of attacks in the game that will instantly break the shield, and there are other attacks that can even insta-kill your character. So dodging is still important. But by having Albedo on the team, your margin for error becomes significantly higher. I don't think it's enough to where you can safely run no healer. You probably could, in all honesty, if you're really, really skilled. For a majority of people, I would still probably run a healer. For reasons that we're going to be talking later. Barbara synergizes extremely well with Albedo, and there are other characters like Bennett that also work exceptionally well. But that's kind of the gist of the Solaris Automa. The two biggest things that it has going for it is that it has burst-like scaling for once, and it's based on defense, as well as it generates crystallized shields with it. Crystallized shields that, might I remind you, also count as shields, so they can trigger weapons and artifact passives like that of the Bolite set, Archaic Petra, and the new 5-star shield-based weapons that we get. It's kind of crazy how bloated this ability is. The one thing that we do not know is if it gives energy. If I'm being honest, I would not count on it. This ability seems like it'll be one of those that have either very low energy generation or none, like no else. If we do get energy generation with this, that's just gonna be another insane character. For you, it's 2 AM in the morning right now. Oh my, sorry. I was planning on having the stream earlier, but I was not feeling well. I was really not feeling well. I apologize. How many hours till the patch? I'm actually not sure. It pretty much depends on which server you are. I know that for me, it's in it's probably gonna be like 10 AM for me. A little bit later, maybe. I don't know what the official time is. I apologize. Ember meta now. Oh boy, I do have to talk about that, don't I? That is something that I do actually have to talk about. Okay, we'll go into that. We'll go into that once we're finished with Albedo. Another thing about the Solaris Automa. Yes, I'm not done talking about it, by the way. If you go to the center of the Isotoma, there's a small flower that will bloom. And once the flower blooms, it becomes into an elevator. So you can go high up. And this is beneficial for a lot of things, not only for general exploration, because elevators are useful and fun, but also for combat situations. Because while you're in this elevator, if you can still do your damage without having to be on melee range, like somebody like Gon Yu in the future can, or as much as I hated Amber, this gives additional safety to your characters. And it can potentially be used to evade a lot of very powerful attacks, which is something that we have to test as soon as the character gets released, because imagine if you're able to use it to avoid explosions that only happen in the ground. It has potential. It has a lot of potential. Mito, I am in the exact same category. I think I'm probably gonna have to skip for Albedo, but we're gonna talk about that later when we talk about the benefits of summoning versus what we're gonna be getting in the future. Amber is broken. What are you talking about? Okay, so here's the thing about Amber. She has insanely high damage numbers, but she is extremely slow. Like, very, very slow. To the point where even those high damage numbers, even at max efficiency, don't make up for how long they take to charge. Let's see. I hope to get Sucrose on the banner. Ah, I see. Yeah, Sucrose is actually really, really good. And I'm in the exact same position. If I ever have to see another... If I ever have to go to another statue to get an Anemo character... Ah, God, it's painful. I hope they eventually give us an item that let us change the Traveler's element on the field without having to go to a statue. But at the moment, that still feels like a hope. So yeah. Solaris Automa. Very, very good ability. Very, very good. We do not know if it generates energy. I don't think it will, if I'm being 100% honest. And if it does, it's probably not going to be that much. But if it does... I mean, I'll take it. I'll take it. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the Burst. Ride of Progeniture, Tectonic Tide. God damn it, Albedo. Why are your names so long? Okay, so, this burst... It's a damage burst. There's very little attached to it. It has very low energy cost and very low energy cooldown, so it's meant to be spammed. something that should be relatively easy with the amount of energy generation that we have available in Genshin. And the damage of the skill is very high. It's not as high as the original numbers that I saw last time were. Probably a good thing, but it's still very high. At level 6, which is where most people will peak out a lot of their characters, the damage of the burst at base is 514% scaling, and if you use it alongside your Solar Isotoma, you generate an additional 7 explosions for 100 damage each. This is at level 6. So the total scaling of the ability can get relatively high. The thing about the ability that we have to keep in mind is that we have now seen how the explosions take into place, and they're not in the center, they're scattered all around the area. So the likelihood that you'll hit an enemy with all the explosions is pretty much close to none. Nevertheless, the AoE of the skill and the actual explosion extra damage is very powerful. Do I think it's enough for you to focus exclusively onto this skill? Probably not. It does have attack scaling, so going to maximize this particular skill will not be an ideal situation. What I would recommend instead is that you maximize the overall damage of the kit instead of trying to focus into a single part. Since every part of the kit is very, very strong, focusing on things like Geo Element as well as crit rate will likely yield better results than focusing on just a single part of the kit. By far though, defense is probably going to be the more valuable out of the two, for reasons that we're going to be talking about later. But even for C0 variants, I would probably still recommend defense. The damage of the skill will be high enough with just the base attack that you get, since most characters, just from having a maxed out feather and having a maxed out weapon, will likely get somewhere around 700, 900, maybe even 1000 attack power depending on your substats. So, really good ability. Focusing on it will hurt the other parts of the kit, so I would not recommend that you focus attack on. The ability itself is very simple, and it does geo damage by itself, so more crystallize. It is exclusively a damage-based ability, so there are very few interactions that work with it. The benefit of it is that it's very spammable, and the damage is decent. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into a couple of the more interesting parts of Albedo's kit. Because as I've mentioned multiple times, this character has some damage. His first Ascension passive, as I have it right now, makes it so that he flat out just has 25% more damage to any enemy below 50%. This is not an insignificant damage boost, and this means that weakening an enemy and getting it to this point will be very powerful, especially with how much damage the burst is capable of doing. Making sure that you cast it when your enemies are weakened is going to be very, very strong. It's a very big damage boost, and he just gets it for free. The one that I think is probably going to be more impactful for a lot of people, and it's probably going to be the one that makes a lot of individuals realize how powerful Crystallized Shields can be, is his second Ascension passive. One of the things about this is that whenever Albedo uses his burst, the entire team gets 125 elemental mastery. This is not a small number. For those people that know, Sucrose has the same type of passive, but she only gives 50. Albedo gives almost as much elemental mastery as a maxed out elemental mastery weapon, just from casting his burst. Might I remind you, the burst has a 40 energy cost and has a 12-second duration. So this means that if you're casting it constantly, there's only going to be 2 seconds in which you don't have this elemental mastery. This much elemental mastery adds quite a bit of health to the crystallized shields, and just base Albedo alone will have very, very strong shields. If you choose to further invest into it with weapons like the Iron Sting, which is something that I recommend for a lot of people that have him at C0 that can't afford more damaging options, the Iron Sting will likely be one of the better weapons for Albedo because of this very reason. It'll increase his shield potential quite massively, and there's one build in particular that actually takes even further advantage of this, which is one that we're going to be talking about later when we get into the build section. It is very much overkill, but not necessarily. Because one of the things about Elemental Mastery is that it works with every single interaction. This includes the frozen status. And Geo just so happens to be able to trigger the frozen status. So, oh boy. We're gonna get to that one. We're gonna get to that one. There's some crazy builds that Albedo has access to that are kind of insane. We'll leave it at that. As far as where Albedo will likely place, as I've mentioned, his defensive capabilities are S+, his attack capabilities are S+, his investment is S+, and his payoff is getting to the point where I might even consider it S++. This character is probably the most broken character that we've gotten from a 5-star banner. It's that insane. And his rate-up characters are just as broken. Oh boy. So, yeah. When it comes to the attack department, he has massive damage numbers. We haven't even gotten to the constellations. We'll get to that in a second. One of the reasons why I want to analyze this C0 first is because it's probably going to be the one that most people have access to. So I'm not going to mention the C2 at the moment. This is C0, by the way. The numbers that I'm throwing you out are C0, and they're already the most busted numbers that I have shown in this channel as of yet. I don't know what to tell you. When it comes to the attack department, Albedo has access to one particular elemental reaction that not a lot of people have access to, which is the Frozen status. Frozen just got a massive buff in the new patch, and it makes for a lot of very powerful damage bonuses that a lot of characters can take advantage of. The new characters the characters he has in his banner increases damage even further, and them themselves can become very powerful in their own rights. Man, sorry, I'm just taking back. I'm just thinking back, but how powerful Zhongli looks at this point in time. And Mihoyo nerf incoming. It honestly might. It honestly might. From what I can tell, it already looks like his numbers have been changed. At the very beginning, when we first got the Albedo numbers, his crystallized the solar isotoma explosion was at a 1-second cooldown. So it's already at half the efficiency of the first numbers, and I still consider it busted. Xiao will be turned into a healer. Oh my god, imagine. Imagine. But yeah, back to Albedo. As a character, he is extremely flexible. In the support role, he pretty much fulfills the need to have damage from the support as well as a very reliable form of defense. As far as supports that enable the Bolite set in particular, Albedo's probably the best in that category because he can ensure that you will always have a crystallized shield on you, given how powerful this is. You don't even have to worry about the crystallized shield breaking, because if it breaks, you just make another one. You have it every 2 seconds. The amount of uptime on this type of buff is kind of insane. And I expect that characters in the future, like Xiao, will want to have Albedo for this very reason. Because Xiao will likely want to use the Bolite set unless we get a very powerful Nemo set in the future. As far as I'm concerned, as it stands right now, Xiao, his plunge attack counts as a charge attack. So if this remains true for his release, this means that a character that can enable the Bolite set for him will be very powerful. His E skills with defense, yes, that is correct. As far as for the build, it does look like defense is probably going to be the main set to focus on. Mainly on either the weapon or the clock, I believe. That is only the supportive capability. In the support role, he brings insane burst-like damage, access to the Petra support, potentially a lot of energy. Not really sure on that one. I would not count on it. And Permanent Crystallize. As a support, he's probably the best Geo support that we're ever going to get, if I'm being honest. I legitimately do not see how they make a more powerful version of Albedo unless they just copy-paste them with higher numbers. I do think that Albedo is likely going to be the best Geo support we're ever going to get. In the damage department, as a main DPS, if you have him at C0, I would not recommend that you use him as a main DPS. His main DPS status is firmly locked behind the C2 constellation. And we're going to talk about constellations in a bit, but I want to talk about C0 first. So, if you're planning on using him as a DPS, make sure that you consider that his investment is going to be massive. You are going to need his C2. So I would not recommend that you go for it. If you manage to get it with just your free-to-play resources, by all means, go ahead and try it. If not, use him as a support. He will be much better in that one. The final role that Albedo can fulfill will likely be that of a burst support. Essentially, you switch into him, you use his abilities, and then you burst as often as possible. This will likely be a really good build in energy-centric compositions, probably with Ning Wang, or the Geo Traveler for that matter. And it's essentially going to be just get a lot of characters that have very low energy costs. Get a character that can make a lot of energy very quickly, like that of Bennett, which surprisingly enough is in his banner, and then just burst as often as possible. This is the brute force approach. He fits really well into this category, and I do expect a lot of people are going to use him in that regard. Overall, if I'm being honest, this character might legitimately be the first S++ character that I rate. As of right now, it's hard for me to say that there's a character that's as flexible and as impactful as Albedo is looking to be. He fulfills pretty much every role except healer to a very, very high degree, and the potential of the character can only go up from here, especially now that Geo's getting buffed. Just Albedo and Zhongli on their own? Yeah. That is one thing that I want to talk about, because they can crystallize with help of the team, and there is one particular character that allows this to be almost permanent. There's like 3 of them, in fact. Utility. When it comes to utility, you gotta remember, he has very high utility. The Geo element by itself has natural buffs in the form of all the buffs from the Crystal Shields, as well as the Archaic Petra. Every Geo character in the game has access to a 35% elemental damage buff. That is not something to take lightly. One of the best supports that we have at the moment, her buff is only like 15%, and people still run it exclusively for that buff. Wait, what? His ult heals? How does his ult heal? Did I miss something? Oh, it's a joke. Okay. Alright. So yeah. Honestly, this is probably the strongest character that we've gotten in the entirety of Genshin's lifespan so far. And I do not see him falling off of this category anytime soon. The amount of defense that he brings alongside the amount of attack that he brings to the table is just it's crazy high. And we haven't even talked about the crazy compositions that he can enable, because there's a lot of them. Albedo by himself can probably enable some of the strongest freeze compositions in the game, alongside other characters. And apart from that, his utility in the defense department for characters that have damage conversions, like that of Diluc, Pitching, Tartaglia for that matter, is also very high. Gotta remember, Archaic Petra, 35% damage bonus. It does not sound like much, but once you actually try it, it's one hell of a drug, I'll just